One of the big things is people don't sort of underestimate how small, social media and the internet and all that stuff has made it. You may be in Massachusetts and the person you're trying to play with is in Massachusetts, but it might take you to reach out to your friend in Atlanta in order to get to the guy or the girl up here in Massachusetts.
Good to see you. We've been kind of running around today. It's been a crazy day. We had a session this morning, and then we've got you'll notice there's a stranger lurking in the background behind Grant, and that's Levi. He's a great bass player. He's going to be going to MTSU next year, so he came to shadow and see how unorganized I am. So he's been doing that all day. And then our wood guy dropped by. So he loves wood. It is amazing how much he loves it. But yeah, the snare shelf is soon to be complete. So I'm pumped about that. But to the topic of today, we've got none other than Mr. Jonathan Ulman with us. I'm really excited about this. And so if you are new to the drum school, or if you've been on here for a while, these are super laid back calls, and I just try to do what my 14-year-old self would have really loved doing, which is getting on a call with people that are great players and great people and talking to them. So these calls are for you all. If you have questions, I definitely want you to talk to Jonathan. I want you to, you don't have to talk to him if you're like, I don't want to be on video, that's fine. Just put it in the chat and Grant can do that, or he's just put in there how to raise your hand, and you can raise your hand and talk to Jonathan. And as well, this will be posted later in the members area with jump links to everything that we talk about. So if Jonathan talks about an artist or a website or something, that stuff's going to be in jump links so that you can just hop right to it. So Bob, what's up? Christina, good to see you. David. Let's see here. Okay, Jonathan, dude, how are you, man?
I'm good, thank you. This is super exciting. I'm gonna actually just notice this, but I'm gonna fix this. But I am super excited. I feel like this has been like a month since you were like, "Do you want to do this?" And I kind of keep checking the calendar and being like, "Is it this week?" Kind of thing?
I'm excited about it, man.
Cool.
So the way Jonathan and I met was actually, we'll talk about it some on this call. I was super impressed with him. He actually reached out to me when he came through Nashville, and you came through specifically just to do kind of a networking trip. Is that right?
Yeah. I had one small session, I think, when I was down there, and then I also wanted to stop by Nelson's drum shop.
That place sucks. Don't ever go there.
and just spend like a half a day in there.
Yeah, Grant just came in and he's like, dude, did you see this Ludwig kit that they just put in there? And I said, yes, I saw it when I was in there, but they want so much for it, I can't buy it. It was a beautiful
place to be there.
Black sparkle. I don't know what it was, but man, the thing was in good shape. So yeah, they do such a great job. When we start doing camps, everybody that should know, which is why we had a wood guy here, because we're getting shelving and coffee tables and all that stuff. The end of the summer when we start doing camps, there's going to be a drum shop day where we take everybody to Forks and Nelson's and we get to just geek out about drums. So I'm pretty pumped about it. Okay, so I want to kind of dive in and talk about what you do and how you've built a career doing what you do. And for everybody on the call, the reason this is important is because I know a lot of you are like, hey, I don't want to do anything except play out on the weekends with my buddies. I don't want to do anything but jam at local neighborhood parties, or maybe I want to play at my church. That's all I want to do. But to do that, we actually have to have other people. And so I was just talking to my 14-year-old son about this, because he said, man, he went to his first songwriting session. It turned into a songwriting session, and he came home just floored. He was so excited. And I said, well, dude, you can get together with your friends anytime and do this. And he said, well, I don't really have any musicians that I know. And I said, oh, well, no, you have to go find those. I said, that's how you become friends. And Jonathan is really, really great at networking and finding new people and making a living doing what he does. So I'm going to kind of let you take over. Jonathan's been voted session musician of the year in Boston. How many years running?
5 years in a row.
Yeah, 5 years in a row. You should follow his Instagram account. He's got some beautiful pictures on there that he does and some really cool projects. But you also work at Berkeley, is that correct?
I do work at Berkeley on the staff side, but in the percussion department, which is pretty cool.
What do you do for
And
that?
I actually wanted to, we could talk about all that stuff, but you actually made a really great point about your son saying that, like, as a drummer, you always need other people, to kind of do this. You kind of have to rely on something. And I thought that was I don't know if that's a great way to kind of dive into it, but I always thought that same thing too. I said I could never do anything on my own unless I have these other people. And so I always just sort of thought like, oh, I'm just going to have to keep joining bands because that's, I never really thought that like my piece to the puzzle was enough to make a career for myself until I started doing more research and being like, well, you're a piece that you can add. You can sell yourself as this piece that everybody else needs rather than you need everybody else. And I actually took me a long time to sort of realize that. But it's interesting at 14 when you were saying your son is saying that. I think at that same time I was like, I can't do anything unless I can't show up on stage and play the guitar and sing and just be by myself. I'm certainly can't get up there and solo for 2 hours and be like one of those kind of drummers. So I'm always going to need other people. And so I kind of turned it around the other way so that it was more, why don't people need me just as much as I need them kind of thing.
Okay.
So
Very
I
cool.
thought that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Very cool. So did you always was drumming something you always wanted to do?
So I started off on piano for probably like a couple weeks, like when I was 10 years old. And then it just didn't feel like right when you first start off with instruments, just like anybody else. It's like if it doesn't sort of feel right, it feels forced. It kind of just felt like that. Plus, sports were such a big thing at that point. It was like, I don't really need this. I got all this other stuff going on. And somebody suggested that I try to play the drums. And I borrowed a snare drum and I had a cymbal. And it's kind of funny. My brother would sit there with a dowel and sit next to me because I didn't have a cymbal stand, and he would sit there next to me so that I could actually have the cymbal next to me and the snare drum. And you know what, without kind of diving in, I don't know if you do that, but without diving into the psychological aspects of drumming, something about the repetitive nature of drums, the sort of monotony, the beats that kind of repeat and stuff like that is very therapeutic for me. It was very calming. And so I didn't think like, oh, I want to make a career playing drums or anything like that. I was just like, I like this. I like that my arms are making patterns and it's very cyclical and I could do this over and over and over. And then the more I did it, it was like, oh, now I add my foot and then I add my other foot. And now all these things are moving, but the patterns are repeating. And it just was it was a very calming activity for me to do. And so I was like, I'm probably going to keep doing this kind of thing. And it was different than like guitar or piano or anything like that, because it's like an instrument in which that's okay. You lay that foundation down. It can be a very repetitive foundation. And I was like, cool, I can do this. So I just kept kind of playing. And it's actually funny. I really, really learned to play drums properly. So I'm on the older side, not too old, but so I grew up listening to hip hop from like the late 80s and early 90s. And I would take my brother's cassettes that he had and I would just play along to him. And the cool thing about hip hop is those beats don't change. They start and they finish exactly the same. It's not about the beat so much as it is about the lyrics that are being said in the song. So one of the things I noticed was that when I would start, it would be off, it wouldn't be working, but you have 3 minutes or so to get kind of like in that groove with the song that's playing. And I found that a lot of the reasons I have a 5-year-old daughter, but I found that a lot of the reasons why kids quit things very easy is you're not seeing an immediate positive aspect to what you're doing. You're failing at it, so you're like, well, screw this, I'm not going to do it anymore. But what I found with that was, well, 2.5 minutes into the song, I was actually playing along with it, and I felt like that was cool. So anytime I recommend how drummers should get started, I always recommend hip hop, because they have 3 minutes to get it, rather than like, I only have 30 seconds before I have to switch to a different, chorus or a bridge section or something like that. And that's, can get complicated when you're just starting off. So I think
Yeah,
I
that's
started with the right music.
you said something really important. So I'm reading a really good book now called Grit, and it's about the two components that they've done studies and found that it takes to achieve excellence in anything, and that's passion and perseverance. And those put together they call grit. But they were talking about what you referenced, like when somebody first starts something, they're not going to be passionate about it. They're not going to be good at it because they've never done it. So there's really no way to be passionate about it. So the way that you keep them doing it long enough to get good enough to become passionate about it is the positive reinforcement. So they have to have really early wins. It has to be fun, almost a game. And then they have to be surrounded by people that are giving them encouraging feedback. So it doesn't have to be you're doing great all the time. They can take constructive criticism, but it has to be from a well-meaning, helping, loving type of a situation, if that makes any sense. It's really interesting that you found that same thing early on.
I think that was the sell. I think that was the sell for me, was that, like, if anytime you learn your first song on whatever instrument, that's like a huge success, a huge win. Like, I'm playing this song that somebody else wrote and I can do it now. And it was like, for the drums, it was like, whatever music I was listening to, whether it was, a hip hop group, I was like playing along with them. It was like, wow, I'm playing the drum part that this successful rap group is playing, and we're playing together, kind of thing. And I was like, that's cool with me, and then as that got, I tried incorporating different, once the limb independence was getting a little more comfortable, I could start incorporating other stuff. But I needed that, exactly like you said, I needed that win. I needed to feel like I can do this. Maybe this is something that I'm good at, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's for anybody that, whether you've just joined, you'll notice that especially in the beginner lesson track, we talk about this all the time. One of the first things we want to get you doing is playing music, like as soon as we can. We want you playing a song as soon as possible, because the gap from I can't play a song to I can play a song, that's it's a very small gap to bridge, and it's a huge achievement. You went from not being able to play music to being able to play music now. And then the next one that we try to get you to is playing music with other people, because that's another huge leap that is not that big of a jump to take. It's just a lot more scary. Okay, so I think that we can talk about really two things, and please put your questions in, raise your hands. Jonathan will stay on as we'll stay on as long as we need to. Well, let me say that these guest artist calls go no more than 2 hours, so we'll stay on. I can't open ended say, well, Jonathan will be here till tomorrow.
Cleared my whole night out.
Don't worry, don't worry. Nobody needs me. So I think the two things we can kind of talk about is we get a lot of questions about the creative process and coming up with drum parts during a creative process with a band that you're playing with, or maybe reimagining a song that you love and a band is playing. And then the other one is the networking side of it. And that is just, how do we meet other musicians? How do we network with them so that they want to meet with us to play? Whether you're just wanting to jam on the weekends, or whether you're wanting to be a weekend warrior, or we have some that want to play professionally. What are the steps? We have some that just want to play in their church, and they haven't taken that first step of like, hey, you got to contact somebody and let them know, like, I'm a drummer, here over here. So which one of those do you want to dive into first, man?
I mean, certainly the networking thing, we can certainly touch on that, because I have a million things to talk about that, and then we could talk about the creative process too. They're both equally as beneficial for no matter what you're doing. I actually get a lot of questions. People reach out on my social media a lot, and they're 9 out of 10 times, if it's not an equipment related question, it's very specifically like, how do I make a career out of this? And you touched on something that's really important, which is, what is that level of career that you're looking to do? Are you looking to be a weekend warrior? Are you looking to just kind of do this, here and there? I actually just got on a phone call with somebody yesterday who, he kind of quit playing for about 20 years. He was a drummer his whole life, and he just kind of wanted to get back into it. Somebody said, hey, call Jonathan, and talk about it. And he didn't know where to start or how to do it. It was different than how he did it 20 years ago. And the first thing we did was like, what's your expectations for this? How do you want to start? I was like, well, I kind of want to see if I can make a career out of this. And it's like, that's awesome. But you got to start here. And then you kind of make your way up to see if this is a 5-day-a-week thing. Is it a 7-day-a-week thing? Is it a one time a month kind of thing? So a lot of those questions are really important, but they kind of allow you to set your expectations of how hard you want to hustle, to make you make this work kind of thing.
That's really important. And anytime, so we have a goal generator that students can fill out. They get a personalized lesson plan, or it can just help them inform them as to what they can work on. And one of the questions on there, several of the questions, oftentimes people will skip, and those questions are on there for a reason. They're questions centered around how does your family feel about what you're doing, and then also what is your goal here? What do you want to be doing? Do you want to be playing out full time on the weekends, every now and then, just with buddies? So we like niche down to what is the purpose? Why are you doing this? I was on a call with somebody the other day, and they were saying, well, I want to play in a country band. They had several specific things. And I said, okay, so this informs directly what you need to work on in your practice time. Like what you just told me tells me everything that we need to be working on in your practice time, because this other stuff is not getting you towards to playing in a country band with a set list of 45, 50 songs on the weekends with your buddies. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind is actually like spinning right now, because there's so many ways to kind of go about this. But let's just kind of focus on the networking, aspect of it. I'm not sure, one of the big things when people ask me, like, how do I meet people? How do I find bands that, that I could play with and kind of thing? And so one of the biggest things that I say is if they don't know about you, you're not going to be able to, play drums or, whatever you want to do for them. So your job is to kind of go out there and let people know that you exist in the world and that you are available to play with them on a project or in a band kind of thing. And so a lot of people say, well, I'm from a small town in, Arkansas, and there's not a whole lot of, bands around, and I don't know who to reach out to kind of thing. And it's like, one of the big things is people don't sort of underestimate how small this world has become since, social media and the, the internet and all that stuff has made it. So, the guy I was talking to yesterday I was like, so, all the guys I used to play with, he's like, well, they're all in Atlanta. And it was like, but just because they're in Atlanta, you may not be able to play with them, but they may know of a guitar player or a bass player, a piano player that they recently did something that was up in Boston. So you may be in Massachusetts and the person you're trying to play with is in Massachusetts, but it might take you to reach out to your friend in Atlanta in order to get to the guy or the girl up here in Massachusetts. And I feel like I really do understand the one thing that people tend to not want to do is, or not work as hard at, is the hustle. The hustle is as equally important as it is the parts, learning or playing the parts to whatever song or whatever you want to do. My brother is an artist. He's an internationally recognized sculptor. He's amazing. Does not want to have anything to do with social media, promotion, telling people he exists in the world and all that stuff. He just wants to do his art. It took me a long time to explain to him, you're so good at what you do, but nobody knows you exist. And as soon as he opened that up to, him being a little more open to getting his name out there and marketing himself, all of these opportunities started coming in. And he's very, and now he's, insanely successful at what he does. but a lot of people I just want to do the art. I just want to play drums. I just want to sit in the drum set and do this. And that's what I tell these kids at Berklee too. It's like, you are so good at your instrument. You are so proficient. You can do things on the drum set that I can't even wrap my head around. If I spent the rest of my life practicing, I wouldn't be able to do what you do. But you're so focused in that area that as soon as you leave school and you're like, I am a master at the drums, the gigs don't just, fall when you step off campus. It's not like, there they are. So you just pick and choose. They're like, I got my plane ticket. I'm off to LA like an hour after I've graduated Berklee. They get there and I check in 3 or 4 years later and they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm working at a accounting firm. And yeah, I haven't really played the drums much since then, kind of thing. And then you get the other side of the kids who have, for the 4 years that they were at Berklee, have set themselves up for whatever opportunities they're going to find when they go to LA. So they're like, freshman year, they start making those contacts in LA. So the moment they step off the plane in LA, they already have all that lined up. So that's a huge piece to doing this. Now, granted, you may not have to do that if you want to play in bands on the weekend kind of thing and play with people, but on a lower level, you still have to go out there and introduce yourself to the people who are in those bands so that they know you exist, that they know you're available.
And that's so we have a lot of, we have a large contingent of people that play weekly in their churches, or they desire to play weekly in their churches. So they just, that's their, Jupiter that they're trying to get to. They really want to do that. And I've had this discussion with so many of them. I've said, okay, well, does the band leader know that you're there? Well, I haven't talked to him yet. Okay, well, you need to. Yeah, but I can't play. It doesn't matter. You need to let them know that you're working on it. Like, go meet them, go have coffee with them. Come and say, can I sit in on a rehearsal and just watch you guys? The more you're around, the more they're going to turn and go like, hey, I need you. We got something this weekend. We don't have anybody. And that's what I did,
Let me, no, I didn't mean to interrupt, but let me say one story and this is one story I tell all the time, and I do this hundreds and hundreds of times, but this is one that I do a lot. Anytime I have a gig in New York, say I have a gig on a Friday or Saturday, I go down on Wednesday and I go and I set up all these meetings from Wednesday and Thursday, producers, engineers, studios, artists that I dig, and I hit them up before I go down and I go, hey, do you have time for coffee? Blah, blah, blah. And some of them say no, some of them say, yeah, sure, come on in. And I go into these meetings with these producers. I wanted this one producer that I wanted to work with so bad. He had worked on a bunch of these records that I just loved. And I was like, I'd love to be able to work with you on a stuff kind of thing. So I went down. I had somebody who knew somebody that got me that meeting. He was in a session. He had literally 7 minutes to meet with me. He kind of stepped out of the studio. He's like, hey man, like, it's nice to meet you. I don't have any gigs for you or anything like that. I don't really know. I'm doing somebody a favor to, sit with you for a second. I said, listen, I just want to let you know I'm a human. This is what I do. I'd love to work with you, blah, 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 blah. I just want to shake your hand and let you know that I'm down in New York and I really wanted to meet with you. And if there's ever an opportunity for us to do something, that would be great. Yeah, sure, man. Whatever. That's cool. Nice to meet you. There was no gig. There was nothing. It was just, at some level, this is still a human thing that we're doing. So it still involves making that connection, shaking somebody's hand. And 5 years later, all his list of drummers that he had used, they weren't available. And he was like, you know what? I need something quick. This kid came down from Boston to meet with me for 7 minutes. Like, I kind of been keeping an eye on what he was doing, blah, blah, blah. Let me see if there's something that I can get him to do. He hit me up. We worked on a track. I did it remotely for him. And it was like, I did that for something that didn't exist. And 5 years later, I got an opportunity to work with him, but I do that hundreds of times. So after a while, a lot of those things tend to work. And it's like, you don't necessarily know if there's a gig or not. It's just a matter of letting people know, hey, I exist and I'm passionate about this. I want to work with you. Maybe if there's something down the line, it's memorable for people more so than sending an email or messaging somebody or commenting on their page. Like, you literally have to get out there, shake their hand, put yourself in front of them. I mean, that's old school networking. And I feel like, I mean, I'm in my 40s and I've had to do that long before social media. So I still think there's value in that resource.
And that's the first thing I tell people is, if you want to go out and meet musicians, you need to go find where they are first, and then you need to go to the gigs, and you need to sit, and then after the gig you need to meet them, and you need to say, hey, can I take you to lunch? Can I take you to coffee? It costs you like $5 to take somebody to coffee. And then you just say, I'm just around, man, when's your next gig? And then you go out and see them, and you go out and you see them, and you go out and you just get to know those people. That's what I was telling my son. I was like, no, all the guys in my first band, I didn't know them. I walked up to them at school and I was like, I heard you're a bass player. Like, yeah. And I was like, I'm a drummer, so we should probably get to know each other. And they wound up being some of my best friends. And it's the same way now. It actually hasn't changed at all for me as an adult. I go up and I'm like, hey, I heard you're a really great guitar player. We should have lunch sometime. Let's talk, So that's awesome as far as tactical things for, getting out and meeting people. And the internet has made it seem to people like they can just reach out over the internet and that's enough. But it's a very forgettable medium. And so it's very hard to forget someone actually coming to you, seeing you. Jonathan and I could have talked online, but instead he hit me up, and before a gig, I went downtown. He and I had an early dinner, and I remembered meeting Jonathan. I remembered talking to him, and that led to me contacting him later and saying, hey, you're really good at this networking thing and doing sessions, and can you come talk to the students? It took a couple of years, but I remembered it. You know what I'm saying? So in person is definitely a thing.
Yeah, and so kind of like dovetailing off of that, you can kind of like, I mean, a lot of times, we're kind of just getting out of the pandemic or whatever, going out to local shows and sitting there and waiting till after the set, to try and like meet somebody kind of thing. It is, I wouldn't say daunting, but yeah, I mean, it's not always something that people want to do, but you're also got to think of it from the perspective of that's what you're trying to end up doing. You want to be that person at the gig. So you're going to inevitably have to be at that gig anyways, once you've gotten the band going. So at least this time you're not working and you can enjoy, a night out kind of thing. So, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to go out tonight. I don't want to go to that gig or whatever. But that's kind of, when you look at it from the other side, it's like, that's what you want to do. And inevitably at the end kind of thing. Yeah. So, so you got to do that a couple times.
We got a couple of questions coming in, and so we'll get those, everybody. And then that reminds me of a story, Jonathan, that I heard about Brian Blade. So anybody that doesn't know Brian Blade, you should go look him up because he's just the most beautiful player ever. The guy is amazing. His touch is amazing. He's from the New Orleans area, down in Louisiana, and he wanted to take from Johnny Vodakovich. Johnny Vodakovich is kind of a local. I don't know. Everybody takes from Johnny down there, and Johnny's a space cadet. He is out there, and he's a beautiful player. But he wanted to get to know Johnny, take from him, and so he actually, if I understand the story correct, got a job bussing tables where Johnny played every week, just so he could hear him and get to know him. And that was his commitment to no, I really want to get to know this guy. I really want. Stanton Moore sloughed Johnny Vodakovich's drums all over New Orleans because he wanted to take from Johnny, So you got to get out there and meet people, especially those that you want to play with. You just let them know. Eventually, they're going to say, "Okay, if you'll stop bothering me, I will let you play with." And then they're going to find out they like it, and then the rest is history. All right, so Christina's got a really good question. I'm really intrigued with your mindset that other musicians may need you. I'm the least experienced in both bands I'm part of, and I have only been working on this for 5 years. How long does it take to be experienced and valuable enough to be able to flip the mindset from me needing them to them needing me?
Well, I mean, I think that that's a great question. I think that, you know, I think they already do need you, obviously now, because you're a piece to the puzzle of these two projects that you're working on. I think um that as once 5 years becomes 10 years, I think that confidence in what you're saying, it sounds like you're very humble, with your question. But I think that if you're working and continuing to be confident in your craft and what you're bringing to the table, for these projects, that's going to translate in your drumming. And I don't I bet these people that you play with are very appreciative of what you're bringing to the table with your music. I too feel that same way. Oftentimes when I play with artists who are significantly technically better than me, or much more worldly and experienced and stuff like that, but every year, every time I play in those situations, and I hold my own, or like I keep up with them, that gives me that sort of like small bit of confidence that kind of says, I know that I'm not as great as these players, but what I am bringing to the table is useful, in the total aspect of the music that we're making. And it does say a lot to put yourself in situations where you are sort of the lesser experienced, person in the group, because that gives you that's the next level that you're trying to get to. And you don't always get that if you're like right at the same level as everyone else. Everyone's kind of feeding off of each other, and it's like, okay, we're doing something. But when you put yourself in a situation that's a little more stressful, to an extent, it's going to give you that confidence, so that the next time you're playing with, in 5 years, 10 years, and you're playing with the people who have just been playing for a couple years or 3 years or 4 years, they're going to look at you in the same respect as like, what am I offering Christina at this point? Am I bringing something to the table? And so I think the more you do it, you're going to be able to flip it and say, I was in that position, and this is what I needed to do to make myself feel more confident when I came into, whatever situation that I'm in. But I'm in that all the time. I always feel like I'm the weakest one in the room, and that people can do things that I can't even wrap my head around. But then I do it, and I trust my instincts, and I go, I know this music. Maybe I had to practice 6 or 7 more times than the other people in the room had to practice, but I'm still coming to the table and bringing this, bringing my skill set there, and that goes a long way. And I'll tell a story about a Berkeley situation that I have, and I don't know if this is helpful, but we have these kids here, like I said, who are fantastic, can do things that you can't even wrap your head around. And when final exam time comes around and they miss their final exam, the excuses coming flying all over the place. Oh, I had a gig last week, blah, blah, blah. I just couldn't get my head around finals. And of course, when you're in the protective bubble of Berkeley, we'll take care of it. Don't worry, you can make up your final exam another time. But I say to them, listen, outside of Berkeley, I say, you're the reason that I end up getting so many gigs, because you're the first choice at the audition, because you can do things that are unbelievable. But I'm the one that showed up on time. I'm the one that was prepared. I'm the one that was professional about the audition. And I'm the one that they're going to want to give the gig to, or take on tour and stuff like that. So it's almost, even if you think you're that sort of less technical or less ability situation, you're actually the one that's going to be most valuable in the group, because you're the one that's going to work extra hard to hold your own in those situations. And so I think that the more you do that, the confidence will come across. And instead of it being like, what value am I bringing to this? It's, I know the value that I'm bringing to this project, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I've had to tackle that lately, because I've got a couple of music projects I've been working on for the past 6 or 7 months. One of them is a solo project that I'm hoping to get out in the next 2 months. And I dealt with that like, well, who am I to put something out? Who am I to make this thing and think that anybody needs to hear it? But it's the same thing as you said. It's like, well, I did this and they liked that, and I worked with this guy and they liked that, and I did this one time and that was kind of cool. And it's like the success begets success. You use that former success to reinforce yourself for the next success. And for me, that's really helped change my mindset. Is anytime I'm doubting myself, I look back and go, well, oh, hold on, now that didn't go so bad, and that was pretty good. And so I use those almost as like stepping stones to build myself to the next level, where it's like, well, let's take this success and this one, and now I'll just step up here, and I got enough confidence to do this, and then I get up, to that next one. But I think that's really important, to look back at what you've done before and use it as fuel for like, well, if I can do that, I think this is just one more step.
I didn't even think I was worthy. And when we were talking, I was like, wait, I could be considered to talk on to your students kind of thing. And you're like, of course, dude, you're like a great person doing. I was like, oh, okay. And then, I think humility isn't a bad thing. It kind of keeps you grounded. I think that's important. Like I know I can play drums, but I'm not going to make it. I think I always have something to learn from it or the people that I'm playing with.
All right. So before we go to the next question, Richard, I see yours. Richard, I see yours there, man. If you got a question, please raise your hand. Jonathan would love to talk to anybody. Even if you just want to ask him, like, what's your favorite restaurant? That's totally fine. We'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. What are let's cover drums. What drums you play, cymbals, all that stuff.
I played Ludwig drums, Zildjian cymbals, Vickford sticks, Evans drum heads, big fat snare drum as necessary, and I use Westone in-ear monitors. I think that's protection racket cases, I guess, is a thing that I use. But very cool.
Yeah. What's your favorite? Let's do this. What's your favorite cymbal setup, your favorite drum kit, and your favorite snare drum? Let's go there.
All right. So definitely classic maple for Ludwig.
What sizes do you prefer on those toms and that kick?
So probably in the studio it's 22, but I actually think the 20-inch is probably the most versatile kick drum that you could do both live and in studio. 16 floor and probably 13 rack. Cymbal setup is interesting. I think for an overall cymbal setup, I tend to like the dark stuff. So the K darks and the K suites that Zildjian put out are great, but I do try to couple things in my opinion. Like hands down, you can't even convince me otherwise. The 22-inch K-Con medium thin low is by far the most perfect cymbal that I think was ever created.
Really? I don't have that one.
Hands down.
K-Con like medium thin low.
Yeah, the 22-inch. I think that is the most perfect cymbal. I don't necessarily. I mean, there's situations where I don't use it anymore, but it's like the perfect balance of dark, but with great stick definition. And I think it's wonderful.
That's that's what a lot of people love, the washy sound, but I tell them, it's something, to have a cymbal that you can hit and it washes, but then it also has the stick definition that you need to cut through when you've got a guitar stack right beside you. Because they oftentimes don't think about live. Like if you've got this super washy, warm cymbal, it just doesn't cut through everything else. Having some of that definition helps.
It's a jazz cymbal too. I mean, that's where like evolved from, but it's just great. I mean, I love it. It's such a hard question because the equipment is everything. Every session requires a little different, but the classic maple drum set just all around in terms of like as a kid, that is to me just the perfect sound, and warm and tone and stuff like that.
What's your favorite snare?
Favorite snare? I think I use a Superphonic probably most often than not. The Rob. So I think aesthetic is cool for me too. I mean, obviously the raw brass snares
Oh
are
yeah.
really gorgeous looking. But there's a reason why the Superphonic was, the most recorded drum in history. It's just a great sounding drum. It's really funny, like from the days when I used to like bring, 5 snare drums into a studio because every song needed that different sound, to the days now where it was like, I don't really care what you bring, we'll fix it in the computer afterwards. Is kind of like oh, you're taking the fun out of it, but all right, I guess I don't have to lug one more thing around. So it's, the day, it's changing, it's, kind of thing. But
Yeah, we're
I'm very lucky to be a Ludwig artist, because the snare selection is insane.
so we actually went on a little bit of a Ludwig kick. We're trying to flip some gear here and have lots of drum stuff here for whenever people come to visit. And so last week we got an Acrolite, a 79 Acrolite, 1979 Acrolite. It doesn't have a scratch on it. And then a Black Beauty. And then today, actually, when I get home, 2 Supras are coming. They're both vintage. And then what do we got? What's the other one, man? A Piccolo?
A Piccolo, and then another black Acrolite.
Yep, a black Acro. So we'll have Ludwig covered for when everybody comes here. Y'all can check their
So
stuff out.
awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So we got a question from Richard coming.
Okay.
He said, I like what you said. You go out there and let the world know you are there. How do you turn around that mindset? In other words, from you waiting for the world to come to you going out and letting them know that you're there.
It's hard, and you know what, and I feel like it's, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, I think it's difficult for people who aren't, this is like as you get older, it's almost like that's just this one more thing that I have to do. But when I was talking to that gentleman the other day, yesterday in fact, he's a contractor, he's a subcontractor, a laborer, and he has his own business and kind of thing. And I was like, how do people know about your business, your contracting business? Because you don't work for a construction company, you have to get hired, so you got to let people know you exist. And he's like, oh, I mean, I tell everybody every time I go to meet somebody out, even if they're anything, I'm like, and they ask what they do, it's like, oh, I'm an electrician, and this is my company, kind of thing. And I was like, why wouldn't you do that same thing with the drums? And I think the problem that people find is when it's your business and it's making money, you're more apt to be like, hey, this is who I am, I need that money, I'm going to go get after it. But when you do this other thing and it's like, well, it's drums, it's just a hobby that I'm doing. Well, it's a lot of work to kind of, it's not, because it may start at that level, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to get to a level where you're actually can make money from this. So you do have to kind of look at it from the perspective of look at it like it almost as if it was a business or a side gig, a side hustle for you. And another piece to that is it's a lot easier to kind of talk about music with people than, hey, is your sink broken? Because I can fix it. Well, if your sink's not broken, I don't need you to fix it. So I don't need you to sell me, that you can fix my sink. But music is something universal. So it's like, if you're talking to people or out somewhere and you're talking about music, it's so easy to kind of get into that conversation of, when people say, hey, what do you do? The first thing you do is you tell them what your career is. Oh, I work at Berkeley, or I work at an accounting firm. Why not start by being like, well, I work at an accounting firm, but I'm really trying to make this music thing work. And, I'm a drummer, I've been playing for 40 years, kind of thing. You never know who you're talking to, who's going to be there, who has an opportunity to do, and to pass your name around, kind of thing. So you don't necessarily have to go build a social media account and try to get tons of followers to shout out who you are and what you're doing. It's the day-to-day people that you're meeting now. Instead of telling them about this stuff, tell them about this new venture that you're working on. Hey, if you ever hear of anybody that is looking, may need a drummer or something, a band or someone, I just want to let you know that I'm available. Everybody knows somebody who's a musician, who's in a band, who might be looking for something. So if you tell it to 10 people, chances are somebody's going to come back and be like, hey, Richard told me that he's starting to do this drum thing. I might have somebody that I just found out like the other day that somebody's looking for a drummer. It happens so quickly. Word of mouth is your most valuable asset when it comes to marketing yourself. I have not in any sort of bragging way. I have a good outreach with my social media. I have a pretty extensive reach. I work at Berkeley. I've been doing this in the city for 25 years. The only gigs that I get come from somebody recommending me or passing my name along in person. I do not get hit up online for gigs very often. Berkeley, I don't get any gigs at Berkeley because everyone's fighting for their own gigs kind of thing. It's the word of mouth. It's that random person that you tell about what you do that passes that along to somebody else, and there's your gig. So you don't have to look at this like, I got to create a social media account. I got to get a website. I got to do all this. I got to hand out business cards. No, just incorporate it into your regular conversation that you have with people. Hey, I'm playing drums again this day. I'm trying to make a name for myself. If you hear anything, let me know. Tell 15 people that. You're probably going to get a call, from one of those 15 people that they have heard about somebody that might be looking for a drummer or a hand percussionist. If play a cajon. I mean, Nashville's like notorious for keeping a cajon in your car just so you can step into any gig kind of thing.
They love a cajon. Richard, did you have something else to add, man? I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great, man.
All right. Hey, Jonathan, man, nice to meet you. Super cool, man.
Nice to meet you.
Listen, let me ask you this. I'm hearing all this networking thing and being out there, showing yourself out there. And as you say, man, I'm an old dude. I'm 56 right now. I'm not looking actually, as you say, in my case, for money or anything or fame. I just want to have fun doing what I'm doing and have an opportunity to play with others. In my case, might be a bit tough. Maybe just because of the genre and where I live. This is a culture thing. I'm in Puerto Rico. It's more Latin. It's Southern genre. You might know that. And rock and prog and this type of music, not much. Now, does there exist for you out there, any of you guys, anything like tourist drumming? I mean, I'm heading to Austin in a couple of weeks for work, 4 days, got my evenings off, and I'm staying a day just to hang around and into music, into whatever it is. And Austin, you know what it is, live city, the live music city, and I want to do something. I mean, I've been listening to you, and I know you're saying in the sense of networking, maybe professional sense. That might not be my gig in a professional sense, but I want to go out there and do something. Now, you think that's something doable? I mean, I'm just going to do that. Just kind of figure out any clinics, anyone out there who might be willing to play. I don't know. Do I sound crazy here?
No, Richard, you're going to Austin. The opportunities for you to find something that you could like sit in or connect with are going to be extensive. I mean, if you're going in a couple weeks, you should have the next couple weeks. You should be doing a little bit of research as to like, all right, what I kind of heard what you said. You're from Puerto Rico and you may be looking for more like a Latin, night or something. Like you could absolutely find that. And you could even find out which shows are playing, or if there's an open mic or something like that down there, or like sort of a community of like that music exists everywhere. You know what? And you could go as far, and I'm not saying you have to. You could throw a tambourine in your suitcase and see what kind of say, listen, I'm going to be in town. I've been playing for a long time. You need someone who can like do some tambourine at your gig or something like that, especially if it's not like an original gig and it's like a night at a restaurant or something like that. Who's to say that you like can't come go?
I do the guiro, man.
That fits right in your bag. I mean, that's an easy sell. Hey, do you got that in your band? I'd love to like sit in on a couple songs with you. The thing is, I feel like you can convince yourself 100 different ways why not to do these things. And then you just want to, you know, just like I can convince myself not to go to the gym every morning. And I do convince myself not to go to the gym every morning. But when I go, like, I start to get into that routine. So the more you get into that, like out of your comfort zone, you have a couple weeks before you go to Austin, you could probably find something or multiple things to do every night of your nights off that you have in Austin, and find musicians to hang out with or chat with. Or like Steven said, it's like you find a band down there that's playing a night one night. Maybe look into it. Maybe reach out to one of the guys in the band or ladies in the band and say, hey, I'm gonna be in Austin. You want to grab a coffee? I'd love to hear about like what the scene is down here and how you guys, you know, play, and then I'm gonna come to your show. It's so uncomfortable, but then again, it's not like it's not an age thing. It's just a matter of, you said you wanted to play music and just get out there and do some stuff and have some cool opportunities. Then you kind of have to make those things happen on your own. So once you get past that, you do one of those things or a couple of those things, and if they work out, it's going to be so easy for you to make those connections, you know, every week kind of thing. I don't know, where are you from, like currently?
Right now I'm the southwest part of the island, next to Rincon, the surfing town in Puerto Rico. So
okay,
that's south. Yeah. So
I think that, like, obviously you're in a smaller, you know, area or something like that, but I feel like you can make these same sort of networking things in big areas and small areas. It's just a matter of starting that conversation with people, because they may come back to you and be like, you know what, I've been trying to do the same thing. I'm so glad that you reached out to me, because I couldn't get the confidence up to reach out to other people. It's like that. And especially after where we've all been, people want that human contact and connection again. They want to talk about music. They want to do something positive, you know, moving forward. So I would spend the next couple of weeks kind of seeing what's going on in Austin, kind of thing, and maybe set your itinerary up, and then make sure that each night of your time there is set up with something different to do.
And Richard, I would also say, because it's oftentimes we take and I'll give you a really good analogy for this that I use. For so many years, I would eat a salad, and then somebody would say, well, I mean, you ruined it because you put that salad dressing on there, as if everything healthy in the salad just went away because I put some ranch dressing on my salad, right? And really, there's so many great, wonderful things in that salad. And if the ranch dressing is what gets me to eat all those awesome things, then a little ranch dressing is okay. The good things are still there. So to kind of flip what you were saying, it's a little bit harder where I am because it's rock. And I think it's actually not harder, because there's probably people that love rock and roll where you are too, whatever that genre may be. And because everyone else is doing this other thing, that leaves plenty of room for you to swim over here in this blue water where everybody else is trying to eat the same food over here and bloody the water over here. You can swim over to the blue water and be like, hey, I'm over here and I want to play some rock and roll in Puerto Rico. Anybody want to do that? And you're going to have guys and ladies swim over there, and they're going to say, we want to do that too. And the gigs are almost easier because you're a unique thing. It's like, oh, they are that prog rock band. They are that classic rock cover band. They are that country band. And so you're not just, you know, Latin band number, 18. You're now of a specific thing. Instead of being a general thing, you're now a very specific thing that nobody else is doing. So I actually think there's a lot of power being a big fish in a small pond. I think there's a lot of power in niching yourself down and understanding what you want to do and how you want to do it, and in viewing the benefit for that, and kind of flipping that on its head and being like, no, actually, this is an advantage, because I don't want to do what everybody else wants to do. There's plenty of players doing that. I'm going to be this guy. And what Jonathan was saying, anytime you go somewhere, networking as much as you can, we're putting together some clinics. I want to start going and doing clinics in person. I do plenty of video stuff. So that's kind of one of the pushes for this next year is camps, which we're going to start at the end of the summer. And that's why you're hearing so much about them. And then clinics. And when I go to a town to do a clinic, I don't just take the lead clinic that I get there, because I was in plenty of bands. And when you're in a band, you got to get scrappy because you're coming to town and you need gas money. So you'll play anywhere. So when I go to a town, I'll play the university, but then I actually reach out to the elementary schools and the middle schools and the high schools. And I'm like, hey, I'm in town. I'm going to stay an extra day. Is there any way I could come talk to your percussion group? Is there any way I could come talk to your, elementary school? Is there any way? So the last time I did a clinic, I actually did 5 clinics. I did one for the percussion department. I then went over and did one for the jazz department on making a living in music in a different way. And then I did one middle school, one high school, and one music store. These 3 didn't pay. These 2 paid. So I had my anchor gig, and then I did these other 3 free. And it cost me nothing extra. And I made all of these contacts by doing that. So I think that, yeah, make the most of your time in Austin. And I think make the most of your time in Puerto Rico. I think that get out and network and let people know what you want to do. I think you're
honestly,
in a
Richard, there's never... Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a Guero fronted prog rock band that I've ever heard of. So you may literally be the future of music at this point. So
look, Jethro Tull took the flute and made it metal. So I'm just saying there's nothing that can't be done. David.
Thanks so much. Come on, guys.
Oh, you bet, Richard, man. Richard's a great player, by the way. He's been uploading some stuff of him playing Rush and telling you he's spot on with it. David, you got a question, man. What's up?
Hi, yeah, it's kind of a question, but it's kind of buried in everything else we say. So, from what you're saying, Jonathan, hi, nice to meet you. We get in our own way more than we don't. I think. I mean, I'm speaking now as an old guy who played drums a long time ago and felt really insecure because I couldn't read music. I just learned to play by ear and all those things. What I did was I went out and I used yes a lot. When people said, "Can you come and play percussion?" I'd go, "Yes." And I'd turn up with 2 snare drums and a pair of brushes and try and get in there. And I'd go and hang around studios or open mic nights, and you get yourself known. But I think there's a huge amount of fear. There was for me, but I just decided to say yes. And I think the fear is that you're going to fail. When actually, you don't fail, you don't try. So if you never mention you're a drummer or never mention you're a musician, then you've not really failed because you've not got there. And I just wondered, from what you're saying about the Berkeley crowd, it seems that it's not just something that me, a guy who just learned to drum from playing by ear, it's not just what we feel. It's even people who are in this, can play these amazing ways. And Richard's popped out now, but I mean, Richard is amazing. He plays fantastic. Some fantastic Rush covers. But I think for me, it was always about changing my viewpoint. So I didn't have congas, so I turned up with 2 snare drums and turned the snares off and played them with brushes and accompanied and learned. And I'd hang around studios because I could do studio engineering. I understood a bit about mixing and things. And I'd end up depping in for people when the drummer didn't turn up or things like that. It was just getting around and just getting known, what you're saying. But I think a lot holds us back, and the thing that holds us back more though is us. And I just wondered if that's what you think, that it's us that ultimately are the biggest barrier to getting into that space.
I got a good story about that before you say anything, Jonathan, about always saying yes. So the Counting Crows, their biggest song was Mr. Jones, and if I understand the story that was relayed to me by one of the players that knew him, their drummer had been tracking that day, and he had just ditched to go grab a beer, and they called and said, "Hey, we have this song, we want to lay it down. Can you come back?" And he's like, "No, I'm done for the day. I'm out." So somebody else that was just there, that didn't really play drums, decided, "I'll just jump on there. I'll put a track on there," and it was their biggest song. and their drummer kicked himself because he chose to have a beer instead of just saying yes and like, yep, I can come back for one more. Yeah, I can do that. So anyway, Jonathan, go ahead, man.
So, just so I understand what the question was, the question is,
Do we get in our own way, really, Jonathan? I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds it's always like we always think that we're not capable of achieving something, so we ultimately don't engage in the way that we could. Whereas we could just go and say, look, I've got this much experience, but I'd really like to play. Like you do at an open mic night all the time, and it's the first step is getting up and saying that, I suppose. But we get in our own way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, and I don't know if I touched on this. I don't know how to read music. I mean, like I work at Berkeley, so over the course of me being here almost 10 years, like today, I had a song. It's a Latin song. It was a sort of a salsa rhythm, and I went to one of the our hand percussion faculty, and he notated out exactly how that beat was played, and I practiced it with him, and I thought it was really fantastic. But a lot of times people are like, how can you make a career out of a session player in the studio when you can't read your charts or anything like that? And I say, you're right. Like that would be extremely valuable. And I'm not saying that I do try to learn how to do it, but what I do is I make up for it in the fact that like I try to learn the rhythms of every style of music that I possibly can, so that when I do go into those sessions, I can say, listen, the part that you have on this chart here, let me play what I think should go with this, because I have a feeling I've played this music before, and I'll play that, and they'll be like, that's basically what I put on the chart, and actually a little more than what I wanted, which is great because I didn't even think about that. So I feel like I've went through so many years of trying to not convince myself that I wasn't able to do a specific gig because of limitations, and rather kind of gone into sessions and just trial by fire kind of thing, and just kind of go in there. And like you said, it's like, show up, just be available, be around. When I wanted to make a name for myself, I literally took 5 years of paid, unpaid, whatever I could possibly do, no matter what. And my wife at the time was like, she's like, how is this like, how are you investing this much time in it? And so I said, listen, I'm also going to have my regular day job because that's what's going to pay the bills. But on the other side of that, I need to try and make this work. And so I would just try everything. And what it inevitably did was, whether those gigs were good or bad or terrible or anything other than nobody will ever hear this record and nobody ever saw those shows that I played, what it did was it allowed me to have that experience to go, I can step into this random gig without any rehearsal, that I'm in the back room listening to the songs. I got to play 12 songs. I'm listening in the back room, taking notes on a piece of paper on how these songs go. And I'm going to get up on stage and I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to try and fight my way through this set. And I open my eyes at the end and people will look and they go, hey, I was pretty good. A little hiccups here and there, but you made it through the set. Every time I did that, it gave me that much more confidence to be able to do that the next time somebody threw something wacky at me. I would just take it. And I would say, I'm going to fight my way through this. And that gives me the opportunity to go into sessions now and be like, whatever you got, I've experienced it. And, we'll make this right. We'll make good music at the end of this kind of thing. So I feel like my story is probably, I took the long way around to get there, but all of that stuff I did to get to that point was to try and build my confidence so that I could step into gigs and then be able to say, all right, this is what I'm worth, or this is my value, this is my rate. I hate telling people what my rate is, because usually they're like, what's your rate? And I say, it's this. And they're like, I'm like, but really, it's whatever you want to pay. honestly, if you want to get a stand, if you want to buy lunch for the session, let's do it. I don't like saying no to anything, because that one thing I say no to is the one thing that's going to take off, and I won't be a part of it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree with that, and I think, when you just had a thought, and then it's just disappeared into the ether. I was just about to say, I was going to ask the question, Jonathan. Just occurred to me: which do you prefer, playing gigs or studio work?
So that's a great question. I love that question, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Here's how I think of it: I need both. I love playing live. I love feeding off the energy of the crowd. I love traveling. I love seeing different places. I love that stage presence with musicians and the communication that you have. The way that I think about it is the studio, the records that I play on, that's my legacy as a musician. So when I look back on my career and I say, I played lots of wonderful shows and traveled to lots of places, it all blends into each other. Lots of people, lots of places, lots of shows, blah, blah. The records, that's my physical representation of how my career has progressed from the first record I played on to the last record I played on. And that, just like a painter, if you were a painter who just painted on walls and the rain washed it away every time, the rainy season happened, you would not have any representation of what your painting career was like. So you paint on canvas, whether anybody sees it or not, you have that representation of what you did. So for me, playing on records is very, very important because I can actually see how I've progressed as a musician along the way. And then I have some sort of look back on, hey, I played drums on that, or, blah, blah. So I do like both. But if you're going to have me push in a direction, I'm going to take studio.
Yeah. So I've got two things to say real quick, and then we got a question from Bob too, David, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Those were fantastic questions, by the way. Thank you for asking them. And I have recently been thinking about this a lot, Jonathan, as far as what's my North Star for my entire career? What is that North Star that I'm driving to that helps me say no to other things that maybe I might be interested in, that pulls me away from that? So it kind of helps me clarify that. And one of the things that I have figured out is that music is an event, and you all have heard me talking about the book Musicking. And that is a great book that talks about musicking as a verb. It's an event that everyone participates in, from the person that swept the floors to the person that made the seat that you're sitting in. It is an event that we all come together as people to experience, is the art of music. And music is just something I like being a part of. And the drums happen to be the vehicle for me being able to participate in that event. I don't care if it's a hand drum or if it's, you want me to, clap. I just enjoy being a part of that whole event. And the other thing for me is figuring out, you asking David, do you like live or do you like sessions? I've come up as a live drummer, and I feel most comfortable actually in a live situation, not in a studio like this, because that was where I really came up. But my North Star, and I'm still clarifying it, is I want to make people healthier, more passionate, and more content in their life through music. And as long as I can fit whatever that is into that, whether that be session work or teaching, this is a form of the act of music. To me, that helps me organize those things, in that direction. So I don't know. I think that we're talking a lot about mindset, and we're talking a lot about clarifying goals and getting out and acting on those goals. And to me, those are big conversations that you don't often have in drum lessons. So we got a submitted question from Ty and one from Bob. Bob's is, do you take lessons, Jonathan?
I take lessons. So what a big thing for me, and just in my world, one of the things that I find is really important, when I find out how people practice and do certain things in the world, people ask me what my practice routine is. as a session musician, it's always really important, a studio musician, it's really important for me to have a good sort of broad range of styles that I can play. And there are certainly styles that I'm more proficient in than others. So like, I have my comfort zones stuff, and then I have the stuff that I'm pretty weak on. So what I was saying today was I have some opportunities to play some Latin, tracks coming up kind of thing. And so I have the benefit of having some of the best Latin percussion faculty here at Berklee. So when they're available, I go in and I have them sort of, kind of guide me through the certain Latin rhythms that, that I'm not super sure about. And then I can practice those on my own so that when I go into a session, I can actually sort of say with confidence, all right, this is the Latin rhythm that I think could go with this song, kind of thing. So I don't know that is necessarily lessons per se, but it's more like using expert teachers to sort of guide me in certain areas that I feel like could benefit me and the studio work that I do. But
yeah.
It is, but I wish it was more of a weekly. If somebody sat me down and said, all right, play the drums for me. My worst fear is that they would come back and be like, oh my God, we got to start at the beginning. Your mechanics are off. You don't even hold the sticks right. Well, this is why you get, you have to eat bananas and coconut water because you get, cramps because you do everything wrong, because I'm self-taught. Not saying that I don't want that, because I'd love to sort of throw it all out there and learn the right, way to do this. But from a timing perspective, full-time job, doing this thing, being a dad, kind of thing, I don't always get that luxury of having that weekly lesson or something like that. So what I do is I take the opportunity to say, okay, I'm unfamiliar with this style of music, and I think it'll be really valuable for me to learn this in certain scenarios. Because after talking to Richard, it's like, well, I'm ready to go to Puerto Rico, and I want to be able to show up and, sit in on, what music. So like, I have the advantage of having these guys here who can sit with me and go, all right, let's start from scratch. Let's learn some of the basic rhythms and kind of stuff like that. So kind of growing my groove repertoire a little bit. But yeah, I would love to be able to sit and have a drum set. I mean, take lessons from Steven would be like a dream come true kind of thing. But I feel like at this, I'm not saying that it's too late, but now I've kind of like junked this all together technical wise, and I know what I can kind of do moving forward.
So the lessons you take are much more, and they're very similar to the ones I take. They're much more goal specific. You have something that you need to learn, so you seek the person out that can show you that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steven, can I ask one more quick question?
No, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I'm leaving.
Bob's out. Yeah, what's up, man?
I want to talk about Jonathan's brother, the sculptor. When he was doing a sculpture before he was known, he was completely free to do whatever he wanted, right? He was like, he could experiment, he could just go crazy. Now that he's sort of more professional, he's locked in to delivering a goods rather than just, is the same true for drumming when you become a professional?
That's a great one. I kind of wish you met my brother, because I would be like, no, he's still a space cadet and that kind of does whatever he wants kind of thing. But in theory, you're absolutely right. For me, it's a kind of a fine line, because I'm obviously getting paid to do what's best for whatever I'm being hired to do. But and just like my brother, you're hiring me because I bring something unique to the table. I'm not a robot. So you may like my style, and just like my brother, they like his aesthetic. So they give some sort of creative freedom with regards to whatever groove I need to put down, or whatever he needs to do for a certain piece. I don't do jingles. I don't do one of those things where somebody's like, this is what you're playing, I'm literally hiring you to physically move your body so that you can play them. I still do the stuff that there is a conversation. It's finding that right part. It may be a part that I don't necessarily, I'm like, this is what's best for the song kind of thing. But I do find that when I'm getting hired to do stuff, you take the creative thing is, it's a group effort kind of thing. But then when I'm in my like band, or if I'm doing something on my own, that's where I take that creative liberty to use my skill set and apply them however I want. It's kind of funny as I work with my brother on this sort of side project. He's a sculptor, I'm a musician. We take Zildjian cymbals and we change them into other kinds of things. We manipulate the cymbals so that they make a different sound that may not exist. I mean, I don't know if you're on social media, but you should check it out. But we kind of combined our worlds to do something creative and unique. And people are like, why would you do that? You ruined this. You did this. It sounds terrible. But it was like, yeah, but kind of wanted to see what was, what we could do. Like, what, we're not hurting anybody kind of thing. So you find your areas where you can be creative and use your skill sets however you want. But on the flip side of that, if somebody's like, hey, listen, I just need you to play like a 4 on the floor beat for this song. I know it's not that creative. If that's what's best for the song and that's what you're hiring me to do, that's what I'm going to do kind of thing.
Thanks, Jonathan. Great.
Of course.
Yeah. And there's a really good song. There's a really good book called The Practice by Seth Godin that I recently read. And he talks about the difference between a professional and just someone that does something. And he says the professional puts themselves on the hook. And so if you have someone that's just creating anything that they want to do ever, it's just for their own creative whims and there's no specific audience that they're going to, it's an audience of one, then that's a one thing and there's nothing wrong with that. But the professional is the one that says, okay, so these are my people over here. They're the ones that I see. And I want to make music, I want to make art for those people that like this kind of thing because people like us do things like this. And so then you deliver that to them and they give you feedback and you say, oh, okay, so they kind of liked this, but then they said some things. So let me go back to the workshop and see if I can do this. And then you say, well, how do you guys like it now? There's an audience that they are attempting to deliver something to. And whenever you become a professional drummer, for me, that audience is whoever's hired me. Many times that audience is you all. How do I teach? I've adjusted my delivery over the years. It's not just like, well, that's the best way to teach it. So it's like, no, it's actually not. I learn a lot from once theory hits you all, it bounces back and I'm like, oh, wait a second, that didn't resonate how it needed to. So I go back to the drawing board because I'm creating things for people like you. I'm not creating things for my own self because I'm my own entity, right? And so I think it's really great that Jonathan mentioned defining, like, this is what I do. These are the people that I service. And if you need somebody that like is a drum machine that just repeats the part that you just wrote, probably that guy, probably not this guy. I think that's a really important thing to kind of make a dividing line on. So, but yeah, that's in a long form answer, like a professional to me is someone that puts themselves on the hook for a certain audience to deliver a certain thing to that audience.
Sure. And
works within that confines. So, but it's a really good book on that. And there's a really good podcast I've been digging on the same thing by the same guy called Akimbo, Akimbo. And it's all about the practice of whatever the thing is that you're, looking to do. So
I want to thank you guys. To sit down on Tuesday afternoon and talk to great professional drummers is ridiculous. It's so cool. Thanks.
You bet, man. And Christina says, so what's the definition of a professional? Christina, that's my definition of a professional, is somebody that puts themselves on the hook for other people and hopes to do it at a level that they could be paid for or that type of a thing. That to me would be my definition of a professional.
Can I ask Jonathan's definition?
Absolutely.
I think my definition of a professional, I feel like I talk about this with, like I said, with the kids that are just about to graduate, or getting ready to graduate is, in order for people to take you seriously about what you're doing, you have to exude professionalism, especially in something, with the drums, because the competitive nature of this field is so extensive that that once your name has sort of a black line under it, that kind of it kind of puts a damper on how you progress in the industry. And I think for me, a professional would be sort of like what Steven said, is it's like you're offering a skill set that you've spent a lot of time, practicing and honing in and refining. But then in order for you to utilize that skill set, you do need to work with other people. So there's a line between like humility and professionalism. And like I said, I have trouble a lot of times where I don't value myself as much as I should. And I know that I'm offering a service, and I know that I'm providing something to somebody, but I'm like, I'm just going to do it for free because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. And I've had people kind of be like, you're selling yourself in an unprofessional way because you're just trying to do it because you think that maybe you're going to miss an opportunity, or something like that. So you got to find that balance. And I don't know if this correlates, but I just heard this the other day, and I'm sure everybody's heard this story before. And I just wanted to say, because I think it's so cool, is a story about how somebody saw Pablo Picasso in a cafe and drinking coffee, and they went up and said, "Are you Pablo Picasso?" And he said, "Yeah." And they gave him a napkin, and he scribbled something on it. Took a couple minutes to scribble something on the napkin, and the person was like, "Wow, this is amazing." And he offered it back and said, "This will cost you an absorbent amount of money." And the person was like, "Why would I pay you that amount of money? You just scribbled it in 5 minutes." And he said, "No, that took 40 years for me to be able to scribble that in 5 minutes," kind of thing. And I feel like I do this a lot, as I underestimate, how I want to be taken, in a professional sense. I want to be people to look at me and say, he's a consummate professional. He may be a little out of our price range, but he's worked so hard to be able to do what he does, and he can provide some to this music that we're playing. And he's got a great personality, and he's easy to work with. He's worth that money that we're going to be paying him. And that's where I constantly am battling that. But as a professional, that's what I feel like I need to do, because if I hired somebody to fix my sink and I had to pay, a person more money, but there's somebody that was professional, worked well, worked quickly, and that money would be worth it to me to be spending that. And I feel like I want that to be the same case with how people look at me. So I think professional is someone who brings the total package to the table for whoever they're working with, and also values themselves as worth what they're charging for the, whatever they're doing.
See, it took me a long time to call myself a drummer, and then it took even longer to call myself a musician. So at this point, even though I get paid when my bands play out, I'm having a hard time calling myself a professional. But then, I also think about it. Either band could replace me. They could just say, find somebody else, and neither one has. So I don't know. I haven't gotten to that point yet where I could say I'm a professional drummer, but
I try to do it. It's hard every day. I have a nickname in Boston. I won't tell many people this, but they call me Johnny Pro Bono, because I constantly am like, they're like, "All right, how much can we pay you?" And I'm like, "Well, it's this." And they're like, and I'm like, "But just kidding, because it's actually this. And actually, I'm going to pay you because I want to play on this record," kind of thing. I'm terrible at it, but it's because I'm passionate about the fact that I just want to play music. But also I battle every day. That's like, okay, but you worked really hard. You sacrificed so much in your life to get to this point. There's a value to that. So work in progress, constantly a work in progress.
thank you, both of you.
Ty, Oh, Ty, we were just getting, he said that answered my pre-submitted question. What was the pre-submitted question, just so we can all hear it?
Yeah, I've got it pulled up right here. It's this is from Ty. What has been your key motivation to keep drumming, i.e., other musicians, creative expression, and what was your motivation to begin drumming, i.e., an album or a song or a specific artist?
Gotcha. Anything to add? He said that answered his question, but anything to add to that, Jonathan?
Yeah, if I touched on that, I didn't even realize, but I'll certainly touch on the sort of the end part. It's a funny story. So I learned to play drums with my brother's hip hop cassettes. We talked about that, which is, that's how I got. It wasn't until 1991 when I heard Pearl Jam's 10 that I realized that this is what I wanted to do for a living. I that was it for me. That was the pivotal moment where I changed like my mindset, and I said, I don't know what this is, but I want to learn it. And it's a really funny story. I'll be quick. It's my favorite story ever. So 10 from Pearl Jam came out, and I'd been playing for a few years. And when I heard that, I was like, this is it. I want to play in Pearl Jam. I'm going to do this. So I learned that record front to back. I learned all the drum parts, like right across the board, because I was 12 years old or something like that. And I was so sure that I was going to be at a Pearl Jam show and the drummer couldn't show up and they were going to be like, oh no, like, first of all, if the drummer isn't showing up at a Pearl Jam show, that means something's wrong. This wasn't like a one-off gig. They're obviously on tour. So, but that's how I thought. I was like, that's what I want to do. So, and the funny thing was, if they did anything different than the record, like I'd be like, I don't know what do you mean you're jamming on this? No, this song is 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That's what we're doing, kind of thing. And so like that was it. And so I spent the rest of my sort of career. I was like, I'm gonna play in Pearl Jam. And then years later, right? It gets good. Years later, I'm working at City Sports in Boston, and Eddie Vedder comes in to the store. And I'm sitting up there, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Eddie Vedder, blah, blah, blah. Comes up to the front. This is the fast forward version. Comes up to the front. And in like 30 seconds, I told him every single thing that I've ever wanted to tell Eddie Vedder, like in my entire life. I learned your record. And then your drummer couldn't show up, but he was there actually. But I wasn't even at the show, kind of thing. But I was going to play. I know that whole record. But he was, I blabbed the whole time about this, right? And he thought he was very gracious, and we talked, and he's like, we're playing at, the Tweeter Center, whatever it's called at the time. He's like, you should come. And I like wrote my name down on a piece of paper. This is Eddie. Pearl Jam's huge at this point. Like this isn't like, I'm not talking to a local musician at this point. And after I worked at C Sports, when I was in college, I would go valet at night. And I like called my best friend, and I was like, who I used to valet with. And I was like, dude, you got to work for me tonight. I just met Eddie Vedder. I got to go to the show. And he's like, oh, dude, like, I can't work for you. My dad's in town. And I was like, oh man, he's like, but just kidding. Cause I didn't want to work for you. Let's go to Pearl Jam and all this stuff. So we went down to Pearl Jam, got to see like, we're in the parking lot partying and all this stuff and trying to find tickets. And my buddy's like, didn't you leave your name with like Eddie Vedder? Like, and I was like, yeah, but that, no, and he's like, well, maybe there's some ticket. We should go look. So we go up to the box office and we're like, maybe some tickets here. I'm not sure. And they're like, well, who left them for you? And it's like, you're going to make me say Eddie Vedder at a Pearl Jam show kind of thing. And so she looked, she's like, are you Jonathan? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh yeah, he called and said that you might be coming. And I left me 4 tickets. And it was like, Eddie Vedder used my name in this situation kind of thing. And she's like, yeah. And so this isn't over yet. Hold on. So first of all, from that point on, this is a story about what it means to remain humble at even the highest level. And for my entire life, no matter what, no matter who reaches out to me, no matter who asks a question, says, I didn't think you would ever respond to me. I mean, you're like a big deal. I was like, why wouldn't I respond to you? Why would I not, have these conversations with you? You're someone that I might be able to assist or help. That humility has to remain, long through your career. And Eddie Vedder did that. He didn't need me to go to the show. But fast forward to like 3 weeks ago, right? The drummer, not the drummer who played on 10, the drummer who toured 10, which was David Abruzzi. I don't know if you guys all know who David Abruzzi, okay? I didn't know at the time who played on the record because I was 12 years old. I just wanted to be in Pearl Jam. But I would see pictures of David Abruzzi all over the tour posters and flyers and the videos and all that stuff. And I was like, that's who I want to be. And so something happened. Somebody did something and posted a picture, and David Abruzzi commented on my picture. And my buddies texted me the next day and they're like, did you know David Abruzzi commented on your picture? I was like, no, what do you mean? He commented on a picture that I had posted. And my dad's like, you got to tell him, like, about your story. And so I got to tell the guy who I wanted to not show up to the gig so that I could take his place when I was 12 years old, that I hoped he'd gotten sick, but not really, but that he couldn't play. And he's like, man, that is the coolest story I've ever heard. That is so cool. And I was like, David, I've waited 30 years to be able to tell you you're the reason that I ever wanted to make a career out of playing drums. And he was so like, that means the world to me. Thank you for telling me that. And I was like, that's 30 years that it took to get to that point. And that's a very long story, but this is what it means to, like, when you found something that your body is telling you need to pursue, like, that's what I did. And I got to tell that guy, like, in person, over the internet. And now I talk to that guy, and I thought that was so cool. Anyways, I don't even know what your question was.
Dude, it's funny you should mention that, because last night I had a dream that the Foo Fighters were holding an open audition for their drummer, and I was having to audition for that. And I woke up, and all morning I was thinking about, man, when I was first starting out, it was a very real thing in my brain that my favorite drummers would quit the band and I would just be slotted into there. Like, not necessarily the Foo Fighters. He was in Nirvana at that time. I was like, but I was the obvious next choice. In my head, I was like, all I needed to do is show up once they quit. And matter of fact, one of my favorite bands, the band was called Squad 5-0 at the time. And their drummer quit. They're a smaller band. And they were holding auditions, and I heard about it, and I was like, all I've got to do is send in this video, and I basically have the slot. I was like 16, right? I was like, and I basically am going to go on tour with them. I just need to make that video. But it's like, it was that same thing. It was a very real thing of like, no, this is going to happen one day, and I'm just going to like step into that role. It's just kind of funny that you tell that story. I had that dream.
And he got that, David Abruzzi got that gig because Matt Chamberlain had it, and he was trying to get a different gig, and he was like, hey dude, you should go out to Seattle and rip with these guys. They just put out a record kind of thing. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And it was like, okay, I've never gotten that call. Nobody has ever been like, hey dude, I don't want the Pearl Jam gig, do you want it, kind of thing. It was like, I get like, they're like, hey, do you want to play this bar mitzvah? It's like, yeah, cool. All right, let's do it.
I'll do it.
But anyways, but you need that when you're 12 and you don't understand. You just know you want to be that person. I know that a lot of people, David Abruzzi said that about John Bonham. John Bonham was the guy that he wanted to be. And so, it all happens to somebody at some point.
For sure. All right, so we've got about 20 more minutes, everybody. And then we're going to let Jonathan go about his life. So if you have a question, we can do a couple rapid fires. I wanted to have you kind of quickly go through your process for when you're needing to create a original drum part for an artist. What is the thought process? What are the things that you pay attention to? What are you writing your part to? How does that creative process work for you? Because we've actually had several questions in the past few weeks on this very specific thing.
Sure. And obviously there's a wide range of, being in the studio and how the process works. But say I'm working with a singer-songwriter of sorts, it's like, the process starts with like a rough sketch of a song, and then sort of a conversation about feel and how they want the song to or the groove to sort of interact with what they're doing. So I think a lot of it has to do with coming back to when I'm in the studio with someone and we're writing a song from scratch. There's a lot of reference. Spotify or Apple Music is always right there. Like, oh, this is the beat that I'm thinking for this song, something like this, something of this vein. And then, usually have a drum pad in the room to say, all right, what are you thinking? Like something like this with this song. They might have a guitar, and you just kind of like feel it out. And then you kind of do the basic verse and chorus. There's no bridge section yet. That kind of comes, after it. Now, this is from a song that's in its infancy. So it's a sort of like a feeling it out together kind of thing. The next kind of thing is the song's already written and it just needs drums to it. In which case, if the artist is there, I usually am in the drum room and I say, all right, run the track, listen, do a rough full take of the whole track and see, either it's recorded or come back in the room and be like, what did you think of those parts? Or is there something you're feeling a little bit different about or indifferent? For the most part, at this point in my life, I generally know what at least feels good in a song. And if you start with that, it's easy to kind of, navigate the rest of the process. And then another style would be where I'm just working with a producer. I work one-on-one with a producer, in which case he's already programmed a lot of the drums that are going to take place in the song, in which case my job is to kind of tracing paper over that and give it the live drum feel. So that stuff is already worked in the box, and it's like, this is the groove, but I need those cymbals, I need those imperfections, I need those drum fills that I can't do, in the computer kind of thing. So across the board, all different, but for the most part, I rely heavily on the fact that I most likely have played songs that are similar, and a similar drum beat would work for those.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, that I think a lot of people feel like they're cheating if they use other music as a reference point or as a inspiration jumping point, when in reality, that's how most music is written. Most music is not written in a void. It's inspired from somewhere by something they heard. They want to make a song in the vein of, this morning, my session was, it's actually a project I've wanted to do since I was in college. It's reimagining the classic piano literature, Chopin, Beethoven, all that stuff, but for the vibraphones in a percussion setting that's not a cheesy, this is percussion ensemble, on concert. And so I'm finally getting to do that. And the whole build of the track was in reference to a mute math track that I heard way back when. And I was like, I really love the way they built into that track. And that's how I'm going to start this and segue it and build into it. So the whole form of that track, and I had other things that I was referencing through that. Some was DJ Shadow, some was other stuff, but most all of music is written not in a void, but with the musicians going, wait, do that. No, this is kind of a Beatles thing. Not, let's do a Bonham thing, that kind of a thing. And I think a lot of people don't understand that that's how. There's a great book called All Artists Steal, or Great Artists Steal, or something like that. So appreciate you bringing that part up.
You know how many drum beats I steal from Jason McGurr? Like basically everything that that he does. I'm like, oh, I'm taking that.
Sorry. Matter of fact, we have a so there was a series I did on YouTube. Jonathan, you'll get a kick out of this, and we would use 3 different session drummers on the same track. And the goal was to send it to these guys that just have cut thousands of tracks and get their take on this track. And then we don't compare them. We just look at the different ideas in video and how those worked. And it's really an educational thing to see the things they did that were similar and the things that they did that were completely different. But there's actually way more similarities than you would think. And Scott Williamson, who's a fantastic session drummer here in Nashville, does it. He cuts to it, but he also does the drum mixing for him. And he doesn't want to hear any of them. He cuts his first. He said, because I don't want to accidentally take any of their stuff. And I do the same thing because I have to listen through them and kind of comment on like, this is why he did that. This is what that's called. And so we both cut ours very first before we hear anything, because I don't want to accidentally like take some, and I will take something without meaning to, you know. All right, so let's see. Let's take a couple more questions. Everybody's saying thank you, and several of them have to go. All right, let's wrap up with Bob's question. I think this is a great question. Okay, someone has to ask, who were your favorite drummers?
I would say I think Nate Smith to me right now is probably, you know, I don't mean Nate Smith like Nate Smith from the Fearless Flyers, like that's the only time I heard of him. Like I've known about Nate Smith for a long time. I think that for specific reasons, that watching what somebody can do with such a minimal setup and be as creative as he is very inspiring. I don't think anybody on my list of favorite drummers has more than a 4-piece kit. I just feel like it's really, I'm not saying I don't love what they do. I just feel like what you can do with such a small setup and you take that and apply it to a couple more pieces is really inspiring to me. So Nate Smith, I think that, I mean, John Bonham was like, to me, like I would hang his pictures on the wall. I mean, not because I knew how he played, but like just because he was so creative with his beats that, you know, for songs that could have used pretty basic rock grooves. Stuart Copeland, I think, is somebody that I'm just really inspired because there's like Latin rhythms, you know, in his playing. But I think Nate Smith to me is like, I could sit and watch him do an entire class on what he does with the hi-hat and how he like bends time and just be like, this is useful for what I need to do in my career.
Yeah, very cool. But Jonathan, man, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to, you know, come and take some questions and talk to us and let us in your brain a little bit about what you do. So we definitely
Can I put in the chat like my social media, just in case anybody had any questions and couldn't get to?
Absolutely, I would love for you to. We've been telling everybody for the past couple weeks actually to go follow your Instagram because it's
okay, cool.
As far as, but that helps having that, because as far as a drummer, you do some really great things because you have a really great look from the camera eye of what's going on. And that to me is fantastic. We were just talking about the Vista-like kits that you have, that you've been taking pictures of. So
it's 50th anniversary this year.
I know, man. So you need to meet a cat if you come back to Nashville. There's a guy. He's a Ludwig artist, but he's also a collector. He owns a RC car hobby shop, and then in the back he's got a studio. And he took me back there. And he's a collector, but he's an artist too. So anytime they release like these limited edition sets, like for their 100th anniversary, they did 100 of this. Grant, what are those? Stainless steel?
The stainless steel Ludwig kits.
Yeah, so they did 100 of them. He bought 2 of them with his artist deal, and he's just got them sitting back there. He's got 50th anniversary and 40th anniversary snares that have never been played. And he's just like, and this one, he's showing them all to me, and I'm like, can I just buy some of this?
Yeah.
So you gotta, if you're in town next time,
it can get very costly and also take up an extraordinary amount of room, you know. But I'm coming back to Nashville. I definitely, it's time for me to get back down there.
Yeah, man. Well, when you come, we'll have you out to the studio and we'll do some stuff.
Well, that would be awesome.
Awesome.
Well, I appreciate this. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Stephen. I'm very honored to be here, and thanks to everybody who let me babble for a couple hours.
You bet, man. If you'll hang on the call, everybody else, we will see you Thursday. We have a Q&A. What time is it, Grant? Is it noon?
Yes, it's at noon.
Yeah. So at noon Central Standard Time on Thursday, we have a regular open Q&A. We'll be doing a giveaway on there as well. And then you can be sure to go follow Jonathan on Instagram. And Jonathan, hang on here, and we'll wrap up in just a second, man.